Anime start with Princess Yona is the only daughter of King Il, the pacifistic ruler of the Kuka Kingdom. Yona worries about her red hair moments before the arrival of her older cousin and love interest Suwon. A flashback reveals that Suwon gave Yona a pear and slept by her side for one night to help her cope with her mother's death. The next day, Yona's childhood friend and bodyguard Sun Hak practices mounted archery with Suwon, who later shows Yona how to ride a horse. Disapproving of Yona yearning to be with Suwon, King Il wants to decide his own successor to the kingdom. She later runs into Suwon and confesses to him, but he only sees her as a sister rather than a lover. 5 days later, Yona celebrates her 16th birthday and a party is held in the castle. Suwon gives Yona a hairpin as a gift, telling her that her crimson hair is like the color of the sky at dawn. At night when it rains, Yona witnesses Suwon stabbing King Il in the chest. Suwon tells Yona that he was avenging the death of his father Yuhan, who was killed by King Il in the past. Suwon's advisor Kaisuk arrives and suggests for the castle guards to kill Yona in order to silence her. However, Hak appears and defends Yona from being attacked by the castle guards. Once Hak learns of King Il's death, he clashes with Suwon. Hak manages to injure Suwon, but the castle guards capture Yona and surround Hak. Yona's servant Minsu fires an arrow as a distraction, allowing Hak to retrieve Yona and evade the castle guards. Minsu disguises himself with a kimono and sacrifices his life as a decoy, giving Yona and Hak the chance to escape from Hirita Castle into the mountains. In response, Suwon sends the castle guards to search for the two. 3 years ago, Hak declined King Il's offer to become Yona's bodyguard. Yona tried to avoid being seen by Lord Kin Taejun of the Fire Clan. Hak later pretended to be Yona's lover in order to stop Taejun from harassing Yona, thereafter vowing to protect her always and forever. A flashback reveals that Yona, Hak, and Suwon played in the snow as children, but they all ended up feeling sick. After having not seen her father for many days, Yona cried tears of joy when King Il finally brought her some chicken porridge, even though it tasted rancid. In the present, while Yona briefly bathes in a lake, Hak finds her hairpin left on the ground and hides it from her, hoping that she will move on from the past. She later wanders off, upon noticing that her hairpin has gone missing, but finds herself in a snake pit. Hak rescues Yona, despite getting bitten by a snake, and returns the hairpin back to her, realizing that she cannot let go of her residual feelings for Suwon. Hak brings Yona to his hometown, Fuga. Hak tells the townspeople that Yona is a court lady in training named Rina. Elder son Mundok is absent, having been called to a meeting of the 5 leaders at Hirita Castle. There, Suwon seeks approval from the 5 tribe heads to become king of the Kuka Kingdom. Mundok defers, giving his support, as it would mean acknowledging Hak is a suspect, and returns to Fuga. The Fire Tribe assists in damming up the river that runs through Fuga as a warning. The town carries on, planning to buy water from merchants. However, Kin Taejun, who was slighted by Hak in the past, acts without orders and sends his men to make it look like the merchants were attacked by bandits. Hak's younger brother Taeyun, who was also taken in by Mundok, collapses because of an illness of his lungs and requires medicine that the merchants would have brought. One of the townspeople, Hande, rides to a doctor in the forest. Hak decides to leave Fuga and dissociate himself with the tribe and Mundok in order to protect the Wind Clan. Hak's final order as chief is for Mundok to accept Suwon as king and to take Yona in and let her live out her life as a villager. After Taeyun receives his medicine, Yona witnesses the injured merchants who are being treated for their wounds, giving her the resolve to prevent the Wind Clan from getting involved in the conflict any further. She humbly thanks Taeyun for his hospitality, and she later convinces Hak to take her with him. Mundok directs them to find an oracle with the power to foresee the future of the Kuka Kingdom. Meanwhile, Taejun's servant Hyukchi reports that Yona and Hak are headed toward the northern forest in the mountains. In response, Taejun sends his soldiers after the two. Hak manages to deflect much of the soldiers, but he is eventually shot by a poisoned arrow while trying to protect Yona. Hak leaves Yona at a hidden spot and goes back to face a soldier alone, but Yona runs out and knocks down the soldier before confronting Taejun about his recent actions. Due to the poison, Hak becomes too weak to fight off more soldiers. He is driven off the cliff, yet he manages to perilously hang onto the edge with one arm. Taejun grabs Yona by her hair in order to prevent her from moving, but Yona uses Taejun's sword to cut her hair and free herself. Yona attempts to pull Hak up onto the ground, but they instead fall off the cliff into the valley below. At night, Taejun reports to Suwon that Yona and Hak are assumed dead, showing Yona's recovered hair as proof. As dawn rises the next day, Suwon remembers when Hak promised to serve under him if he were to marry Yona. Suwon is finally crowned king during the coronation ceremony with his ambition to restore the kingdom to its former glory. Meanwhile, Yona wakes up in a hut to a caretaker named Yoon, who is currently treating Hak for his wounds as he is currently unconscious. As Yoon's guardian Iksu arrives, it is revealed that Iksu is the oracle. Yoon mentions that Yona never once thanked him for treating Hak thus far. After Yona later thanks Yoon, he tells her that the oracles were banished from the kingdom in the past for their higher authority over the kings. At night, a worried Yona finds Hak outside and expresses her concern of feeling abandoned. The next morning, Yona meets up with Iksu near a waterfall, where they discuss about the kingdom's creation myth of the four dragons, the same story that King Il told Yona when she was younger. The four dragons bestowed their power upon four warriors to protect King Hiryu, who was the human embodiment of the Crimson Dragon, until the kingdom was rid of evil. The four dragon warriors dispersed after King Hiryu finally rested in peace. Iksu instructs Yona to find the descendants of the four dragon warriors, lest Hak would be on the path to death. Wanting to become stronger, Yona asks Hak to teach her how to fight. Yona reawakens at night, remembering what Iksu had told Yona about Yoon. When Yoon was taking care of Yona, such as taking care of her hair by cutting it so it looked more proper, they have some casual conversation. Yona tries finding the right opportunity to bring up the topic of Yoon joining Hak and Yona, but the opportunity is eventually passed. Yoon shows Yona a book he got from Iksu and shows off his reading skills. When Yoon leaves the room, Iksu asks Yona about how Yoon was doing about the subject, only to find out that she hadn't asked him yet. Iksu tells Yoon that he doesn't need him anymore, and that he can continue his life adventuring with Hak and Yona. Yoon runs off and stands by a fire with the book, attempting to burn it. Yoon stops and starts going over the past and how he had met Iksu. A younger Yoon was seen trying to threaten Iksu into giving him his gold. Iksu exclaims that he had already given the last piece of gold to another child and promises to bring back something well worth it for Yoon next time. When Iksu turns to leave, Yoon invites Iksu into his home. Iksu sighs happily, now that he has a place to stay. During the night, Yoon applies medicine to Iksu's forehead, assuming that he was asleep. Iksu smiles at Yoon for what he did. The next day, Iksu returns and gives a sleeping Yoon a potato, immediately waking him up. Iksu explains that he traded his shoes in for the potato, and Yoon questions why he would go too far to do that for him. After that, Yoon starts worrying that Iksu will start getting cold from being barefoot, and Iksu tells Yoon that he knew how to make shoes. Yoon becomes intrigued and asks Iksu to teach him how to make shoes. Yoon's shoes were perfect, and Iksu's were sloppy and messy. Yoon offers his shoes to Iksu in return for another lesson. Iksu learns that Yoon could read simple books and dreams of traveling. When Iksu begins to leave, he promises Yoon that he will be back with a lot of books and souvenirs for him from the outside world. When Iksu comes back to Yoon, he is worn out and beaten. Passing thieves had asked Iksu about gold and stole his belongings instead when he told the thieves that he didn't have any. Iksu goes on to say that he will stay away from people for a while, and came to say a final goodbye to Yoon. He turns around to leave when Yoon reaches out and grabs him, and pleads that he will go with Iksu. They pull into a hug, and Yoon starts going with Iksu. Iksu appears behind Yoon again, and asks him once again about traveling with Yona and Hak, as well as noting how Yoon's sandals were starting to wear out. Yoon points that out to Iksu also, and decides to make him another pair. When Iksu becomes overjoyed with his sandals, he spins and moves around and nearly falls when he catches himself. Iksu goes on to say that he can handle himself. Yoon confesses that if Iksu told him to travel with the two, then he would, even if he called the princess naive and ignorant of the world. Iksu starts crying after seeing that Yoon will be leaving him, and Yoon starts tearing up a little also. Hak and Yona are behind the bushes not too far from them, observing and smiling. Yoon is now in front of Iksu with his attire and bag, ready to accompany Hak and Yona. Hak questions about Yoon's bag and asks him if he had any books in there, stating that it'd be useless work. Yoon goes through his bag showing Hak, before he turns to leave him. Yoon waves his final goodbye to Iksu, and Iksu shows his face and smiles as he is leaving. Suwon focuses on reforming the country. Kaisuk walks in and informs Suwon on the crimes happening in Kuka Kingdom, whilst he sees the book about the legendary four dragons and King Hiryu on Suwon's desk, noting that it was a forbidden book. As Suwon talks about the book, he concludes that fairy tales as such would not reform the country. Later, Yona, Hak, and Yoon head towards the location of one of the dragon warriors, who lives in a secret clan atop a mountain. They stay in a nearby village for a short break whilst avoiding fire tribe pursuers. But Yona, who continues to walk behind Hack's shadow, comes to the resolve overnight that she must protect herself and Hack. After a narrow escape from some fire tribe guards, Yona asks Hack to teach her how to use the sword. However, Hack states that he will only teach her bow for now after becoming convinced. Training diligently as they travel, Yona struggles with her father's attitude about weapons. She fails to kill an animal as she lacks the intent to kill as noted by Hack. As Hack continues his training with Yona, he asks her to shoot him, or imagine her enemies. Whilst Yona insists that one of such exists, Hack then tells her to envision one. Immediately, Yona manages to shoot the arrow. She looks down and tells Hack how she hates this side of him, but then she begins crying, saying how she is willing to pick up a weapon for his sake. However, Hack dismisses this and tells her that it's his duty to protect her, and not hers. A little later, a group of